When I discovered a tube of lubricant tucked away in my wife's lingerie drawer, I realized Linda was being unfaithful. When I learned it was with Ryan, our daughter's husband, my entire world shattered. Linda wasn't simply an adulterous spouse. She was a woman prepared to murder her husband after nearly 35 years together. They aimed to toy with my existence. All right, what I did to them in response left them both howling in agony. Before I reveal precisely what I inflicted on Ryan and Linda, please subscribe to my channel and share in the comments which city you're viewing from. Tales like this must be circulated to alert others about deceivers lurking in everyday life. My name is Brian Hayes, and I'm about to recount how I uncovered that my wife of 35 years was scheming to end my life for the insurance payout. But it wasn't merely the infidelity that almost ruined me. It was realizing she was involved with our own son-in-law. The instant I sensed trouble arrived on a Thursday evening when I unearthed that tube of intimate lubricant concealed in Linda's lingerie drawer. Let me rewind a bit. For months, my wife had been behaving oddly. Linda, my auburn-haired 58-year-old wife who once welcomed me home after my shifts at Lowe's, now avoided my gaze entirely. She was constantly on her phone, messaging someone and concealing the screen whenever I approached. She began using luxurious cologne again, a habit she'd abandoned years ago. Then there was Ryan Thompson, our son-in-law. The 32-year-old gardener wedded to our daughter Megan had been appearing at our Seattle residence incessantly, always with justifications. He required equipment. He wished to inspect the watering system. He was concerned about our fir tree, but Ryan only visited when I was meant to be at work until late. That Thursday, I returned home prematurely due to a severe headache and spotted Ryan's silver SUV parked down the block. I entered our house silently and overheard voices from the dining area. Linda's giggle, but altered, fresher, coquettish. "You're awful," I heard her murmur, followed by Ryan's resonant laugh. When I stepped into the dining area, Linda leapt up so abruptly her seat scraped the tiles. Ryan was propped against my countertop, sipping tea from my preferred cup, appearing utterly at ease. "Brian." Linda's tone was overly cheerful. "You're back early." Ryan displayed his casual grin. "Just examining that sprinkler setup." "Brian, spotted some dry patches in your grass." The rationale seemed logical, but something felt amiss. Linda's rosy cheeks, the way they'd both flinched at my arrival, the familiar manner in which they'd been conversing. Ryan departed swiftly, but I noticed the glance exchanged between them. It endured only a moment, but it was charged with significance, the sort of look that implied they'd resume their discussion later. That evening, Linda was exceptionally solicitous. She prepared my favorite stew and repeatedly inquired about my migraine. Her affection should have soothed me, but it seemed theatrical, as if she were compensating excessively for a hidden fault. The following day, Linda was still slumbering when I rose to locate my spectacles. I believed I'd placed them on my bedside table, but they were absent. Perhaps they'd slipped behind the cabinet overnight. I softly opened Linda's cabinet drawer, suspecting they might have shifted to her side. That's when my fingers touched something out of place amid her satin undergarments and sleepwear. A tube of intimate lubricant, premium, top tier, still in its sealed box. I gazed at it in the dawn light streaming through our bedroom pane. My spectacles were overlooked. Linda and I hadn't shared intimacy in over 3 years. We'd both acknowledged it as a facet of aging. So why did she possess this? And why was it stashed like a shameful mystery I restored everything precisely as discovered? My hands quivering. The woman resting serenely beside me, the woman I'd cherished for nearly 4 decades, abruptly seemed like an utter unknown, and I had no inkling how much graver it was destined to become. That revelation altered everything. I required solid proof, not mere doubts. I needed to hear the facts directly. Friday morning. I bid Linda farewell as usual, but all felt transformed. Her kiss was chilly, and she scarcely glanced up from her device. As I headed to Lowe's, my thoughts were already devising a strategy. 15 years in store oversight had educated me on monitoring systems and observation gear. During my break, I drove to an electronics store and acquired a compact digital audio recorder with sound-triggered functionality, the type that could capture for extended periods undetected. "Planning to document some talks," Sir, the youthful attendant inquired. "Something similar," I answered, settling in currency. That afternoon, I phoned Linda. "Hey, dear, I'm staying late this evening. Stock check in the outdoor section." "Oh, all right," she responded, and I detected alleviation in her voice. "I'll warm up some remnants. Don't stay awake." This could last until 11:00. At 6:00, rather than going home, I stationed myself 4 blocks distant and strolled back through our district. I felt like an operative in my own existence. "Mrs. Jenkins waved from her yard, and I compelled a smile, pondering if she possessed knowledge I lacked. I accessed via our rear entrance, proceeding quietly. The residence felt altered when I believed Linda was concealing secrets. Every squeak resonated louder. Every silhouette appeared dubious. I could hear the bath running above. Linda was preparing for an event. Acting swiftly, I identified the ideal location behind our family room bookcase, nestled among photo collections we seldom viewed. The gadget was tiny enough to conceal fully. I examined it once, murmuring, testing, and replaying it flawlessly clear. My hands trembled as I arranged it. In 35 years of union, I'd never surveilled Linda, but uncovering that lubricant had fractured something essential. The bath ceased. I promptly set the recorder and proceeded to the kitchen, seizing a drink to justify my presence. "Brian," Linda summoned from above. "Is that you?" "Yes, just fetching some water. Misplaced my container. I assumed you were staying late." "I am." Just paused briefly. When she descended, she appeared radiant. Cosmetics, coiffed locks, an outfit I hadn't witnessed in weeks. She resembled someone on a rendezvous. "You look lovely," I remarked. "Heading somewhere exceptional." She flushed. "Just dining with friends from Pilates. Nothing elaborate." "Which friends?" "Sarah and Diane from class." "That fresh French spot in Bellevue." I assented and pecked her cheek, detecting costly scent. "Enjoy yourself. See you upon return." As I departed, I observed our house in the mirror. Within 15 minutes, Ryan's silver SUV turned onto our road. I positioned at the block's end and waited, pulse racing. At 7:45, Ryan approached our front entrance and rapped. Linda responded instantly, as if she'd been stationed by the window, even remotely. I could observe how she beamed at him, how she moved aside to admit him, how she shut the door rapidly behind him. I remained in my vehicle for 90 minutes, observing our house, the closed drapes, contemplating the recording apparatus hidden in our family room. Tomorrow I'd possess answers. Tomorrow I'd grasp the reality. But as I eventually returned to Lowe's, I acknowledged I was frightened of what that reality might entail. The subsequent night, I lingered in my vehicle outside Lowe's for 30 minutes, examining the small digital recorder in my grasp. I'd retrieved it that afternoon while Linda was at her alleged Pilates session. The device indicated 3 hours and 12 minutes of captured dialogue. I was petrified to initiate playback. Ultimately, I inserted the headphones and activated it. At first, merely quietude, then the noise of our front entrance opening. "I was beginning to believe you weren't arriving." Linda's voice, gentle and close. "Apologies. Darling, had to complete a task in Redmond. Congestion was brutal." Ryan's voice, similarly close. The manner he addressed her as darling twisted my gut. I advanced through trivial chatter about his gardening duties, her grievances regarding my extended hours at Lowe's. Then Ryan's tone grew more grave. So, did you contact the insurance firm? My veins chilled. I did, Linda answered. The coverage is certainly 400,000 and I'm the only recipient. Excellent. And you're certain he doesn't doubt anything Brian is oblivious? Assumes I'm merely experiencing hormonal changes or such. He has no clue I know about his cholesterol medication. I halted playback, my hands quaking. Cholesterol medication. I didn't suffer from high cholesterol. What were they discussing? I resumed playback. The tablets I obtained from my associate at the drugstore appear identical to his standard ones, Ryan was stating. But these will progressively elevate his cholesterol over time, render it appear as a natural stroke. How long, Linda inquired. Perhaps 4 months, 5 at most. At his age, with his tension levels, nobody will inquire, particularly after I begin incorporating extra fats into his meals. I felt nauseous. They weren't solely conducting an affair. They were plotting to assassinate me. 400,000, Linda mused dreamily. We could vanish to Hawaii like we discussed. Acquire that modest oceanfront cottage, and your daughter won't suspect a thing. Megan. She's too occupied with her nurse practitioner role to notice. Besides, she adores you. Thinks you're beneficial for me after all these years with dull old Brian. The nonchalant way she disregarded our 35-year marriage. The way she labeled me dull old Brian. Wounded deeper than any bodily ache I'd ever endured. What about the residence? Ryan asked. I'll dispose of it after a respectable grieving interval. Perhaps 7 months. Then we're liberated. There was a lull, then the sound of embraces. I yanked out the headphones, incapable of continuing. I sat in my vehicle in the Lowe's lot, encircled by the accustomed sights of my workplace, and sensed my whole universe disintegrate. My wife of 35 years wasn't just unfaithful. She was scheming to slay me for my insurance funds with our son-in-law, the man wedded to our daughter, the man I'd embraced into our kin, assisted with relocations for pocket cash when his gardening venture struggled. I contemplated all those occasions Ryan had visited lately. Had he been altering my pills, then I hastened home and proceeded directly to our medicine cupboard. My cholesterol tablets appeared precisely as ever. But now I knew they weren't. That night, I discarded every tablet into the drain and lay awake gazing at the ceiling while Linda slumbered tranquilly beside me. The woman who was orchestrating my demise was resting 3 feet away, likely envisioning Hawaii and seaside homes purchased with my demise funds. But they'd committed one vital error. They'd undervalued Brian Hayes. I'd devoted 45 years resolving issues, directing staff, managing emergencies, and I was poised to manage the largest emergency of my existence. They desired to gamble with my life. Fine, but I was going to alter the regulations. After uncovering their assassination scheme, I couldn't simply await poisoning. I needed to learn everything about Ryan Thompson. If I was going to retaliate, I required leverage. The next day, I reported ill to Lowe's and stationed outside Ryan's condo building. At 8:45, he emerged in his gardening attire and entered his silver SUV. I tailed him, maintaining 4 vehicles behind. Ryan's initial halt wasn't a gardening assignment. It was a Whole Foods market on Aurora Avenue. He entered for 30 minutes and exited with a modest sack, purchasing as if for another person. From Whole Foods, Ryan drove to Bellevue, a posh district. He entered the driveway of an elegant contemporary home with impeccable landscapes. I positioned down the road and observed through field glasses. A woman opened the door. Older, perhaps mid-60s, platinum hair, opulent attire. She embraced Ryan closely, not like a patron greeting her gardener. The embrace persisted too long. Her palm lingered on his torso. Mrs. Laura Jenkins, our neighbor from 4 houses away. Ryan carried the grocery sack inside and didn't emerge for over 90 minutes. When he appeared, his hair was disheveled and his shirt creased. Mrs. Jenkins stood in her entryway clad in a velvet robe, waving farewell with the same wistful smile I'd observed on Linda's face. My stomach sank. Ryan wasn't just betraying with my wife. He was operating a scheme. I followed him to Capitol Hill where another older woman, perhaps late 50s, greeted him with close familiarity, then to Redmond, where a third woman, probably 62, virtually dragged him inside. By midday, I'd witnessed Ryan visit 5 different women, all senior, all affluent. Judging by their areas, at each site, he remained 60 minutes to 2 hours. At each site, he emerged appearing as if he'd just engaged in intimacy. Ryan Thompson wasn't merely a gardener. He was a professional gigolo, aiming at mature women with wealth. I sat in a Burger King lot processing what I'd seen. Ryan was methodically enticing prosperous women in their 50s and 60s. But why the realization struck me forcefully. Linda wasn't unique. She wasn't the passion of Ryan's life. She was merely another target in his sugar mama pursuit operation. Another isolated, mature woman with resources to exploit. But Linda was distinct. Linda had a husband with a $400,000 life insurance policy. Linda had a husband who could be eliminated to make Ryan wealthy enough to vanish eternally. That afternoon, I drove to Mrs. Jenkins's house and knocked. She answered in the same velvet robe, cheeks still flushed. "Brian, what brings you here, Laura? I need to question you about something. Are you involved with Ryan Thompson?" Her face paled, then reddened. "What do you imply I saw him here this morning?" "Laura, Ryan is married to my daughter and he's having an affair with my wife. You're not the only one." She stumbled backward, clutching the doorframe. "That's impossible. Ryan loves me. He's going to leave his wife. Has he requested money from you? Access to your finances?" The expression on her face revealed everything. Ryan Thompson was a professional swindler, and he'd been manipulating all of us. Mrs. Jenkins collapsed, weeping on her doorstep, disclosing the true extent of Ryan's operation. He claimed his gardening business was faltering. She sobbed. "I've provided him $12,000 over 5 months for tools, vehicle payments, venture investments." My anger surged. "What about your testament?" Laura, her face crumpled. "He assisted me revise it last month. Named him a beneficiary for $20,000. Ryan wasn't just pilfering funds. He was positioning himself to profit from their demises. Over the next 3 days, I probed Ryan's other targets. What I uncovered was a methodical scam operating for at least 3 years. Sophia Lee in Capitol Hill had given Ryan over $25,000 for various crises. Ryan promised to wed her while gradually draining her resources. Rebecca Harris in Redmond had been covering Ryan's lease for 7 months. She believed they were cohabiting. But Ryan persuaded her he needed his own space for business. Olivia Grant in downtown Seattle had purchased Ryan a new vehicle as a betrothal present. Ryan promised to propose on her 68th birthday. Each woman believed she was Ryan's sole affection. Each woman was being economically exploited. Each had been coerced into altering legal documents in Ryan's favor. But Linda was the grandest prize. Linda wasn't just donating money. She was aiding and committing homicide for $400,000. Ryan had researched his marks meticulously. Solitary widows and dissatisfied wives with substantial assets. Women whose spouses were either deceased or could be rendered deceased. I estimated he'd pilfered over $80,000 with potentially hundreds of thousands more in inheritance funds if his scheme succeeded. That's when I resolved, this couldn't solely be about vengeance on Linda and Ryan for attempting to kill me. This had to be about safeguarding all of Ryan's targets and guaranteeing he could never harm another woman. Ryan thought he was clever, targeting older women he presumed were susceptible. But he'd committed one critical blunder. He'd targeted the wrong man's wife. I'd spent my career resolving issues and managing crises. I knew how to plan, implement, and permanently address problems. Ryan wanted to gamble with people's lives. Fine. I was going to terminate his game permanently. The plan forming in my mind was elegant in its simplicity. Ryan had used closeness as a weapon against these women. I was going to turn that same closeness against him publicly, degradingly, in a way that would expose his crimes to everyone and ensure he could never victimize another woman. Linda thought she was going to be wealthy. Ryan thought he was going to escape to some island paradise with stolen funds. They were both mistaken. I was going to ensure the entire world saw exactly what kind of fiends they truly were, and I knew precisely how to achieve it. That night, I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by instruments and materials, my mind operating like the problem-solving apparatus it had been for 45 years. Ryan and Linda wanted to demolish me fine, but I was going to demolish them first, and I was going to do it in a way that revealed their crimes to the whole world. The plan had to be flawless. It had to be communal, and it had to ensure that Ryan could never hurt another woman. My years overseeing Lowe's had taught me about compounds, bonds, and commercial supplies. I knew exactly what I required, and I knew how to obtain it without arousing doubt. The core of my plan was elegantly straightforward. Ryan and Linda were employing intimacy as their tool. I was going to reverse that tool against them. They desired to be united. I was going to ensure they were adhered together, literally, commercial super adhesive, the type we utilized for robust building projects at Lowe's. Once it fused, it demanded expert medical aid to detach. It would be excruciating, mortifying, and impossible to conceal. But the adhesive was merely the start. I needed to guarantee utmost public revelation. I needed observers. I needed crisis responders. I needed the whole district to witness what Ryan and Linda truly were. The fire alarm scheme occurred to me while reviewing our store's safety procedures. An activated fire sensor would summon the fire brigade, and if there were noises of individuals in peril, they'd force entry to rescue lives. My daughter Megan was a nurse practitioner coordinator. There was a strong likelihood she'd be on the response crew. This was the aspect that caused me hesitation. Megan would have to behold her mother and her husband in the most degrading circumstance conceivable. She'd have to observe the ruin of her marriage and her family in the most communal manner possible. But Megan was also Ryan's target. She merited to know what sort of man she'd wedded. She merited to know that her husband was a hunter who'd been scheming to devastate our family. I spent the weekend collecting materials, commercial super adhesive from our storage, a wireless speaker compact enough to hide but audible enough to mimic cries for assistance, fire sensor power cells, and a distant activation mechanism I constructed using electrical expertise from my initial days in sales. The toughest part was gaining entry to Linda and Ryan's rendezvous location. But I'd been monitoring their routine for months. They always utilized our house when I was allegedly working overtime. They felt secure there, relaxed, negligent. That negligence was going to be their undoing. I tested every element of my plan. The fire alarm would initiate. The wireless speaker would transmit sounds of distress. The fire brigade would arrive. They'd force the door to preserve lives. They'd discover Ryan and Linda adhered together with commercial glue, incapable of detaching, incapable of concealing, incapable of refuting what they were doing. The elegance of the plan was its straightforwardness. I wouldn't need to challenge them outright. I wouldn't need to demonstrate anything legally. The proof would be literally bonded to their forms. The entire district would observe their degradation. Ryan's other targets would recognize him for what he truly was. But most crucially, Megan would comprehend the truth. She'd perceived that her husband was a fraudster, and her mother was a prospective killer. It would wound her. but it would also liberate her from Ryan's control. As I sat in my garage that Saturday night finalizing my plan, I experienced something I hadn't felt in months: mastery. For the first time since discovering that lubricant in Linda's drawer. I wasn't the sufferer. I wasn't the objective. I was the pursuer. Ryan Thompson had spent 3 years ruining women's lives. Tomorrow, I was going to ruin his. Monday morning, I entered Lowe's, aware this might be my final day as merely a sales overseer. I was about to transform into something entirely different. My initial halt was our industrial supply area, commercial super adhesive, the variety used for heavy assembly. The warning stated that dermal contact necessitated prompt medical care. Ideal, the glue was transparent, scentless, with the identical texture as intimate lubricant, in subdued illumination. Nobody would detect the variance. From our protection division, I borrowed a small wireless speaker. I examined its loudness in my workspace, sufficient to imitate people in peril. I acquired emergency alert sound files, feeling ill but recognizing it was essential. The components came from our wiring section: distant controls, power cells, cordless emitters. During midday, I fitted a secondary fire sensor in our family room, matching our current setup, but governed by a distant activator I could trigger from exterior. Linda and Ryan convened every Wednesday when I supposedly labored late on stock. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Tomorrow, their habit would become their snare. That night, I examined everything in my garage. Distant activator, flawless. Wireless speaker linked flawlessly. Super adhesive tube resembled Linda's concealed lubricant identically. I rehearsed the order. Await Ryan. Grant them 45 minutes. Initiate fire alarm. Activate peril sounds. Return as worried spouse when crisis vehicles arrived. Synchronization was vital. Too soon and they wouldn't be compromised. Too late and they might depart. Wednesday morning, I phoned Linda. Dear, I'll be quite late tonight. Full stock of the patio area. Might not return until 11:00. Oh, that's okay, she said. Thrill scarcely concealed. I'll just view shows and retire early. Don't linger. And Linda, I adore you. Hesitation. I adore you too. Brian. Likely the final falsehood we'd ever exchange. At 3:30, I positioned 3 blocks from home. Ryan's silver SUV materialized at 3:45 precisely on time. He strode assuredly to our entrance, bearing a modest sack. Beverages or blooms. Probably. He had no notion he was entering a trap 45 years in the crafting. I waited 45 minutes, heart throbbing. Then, I grasped my phone and the program that would alter everything. The instant had come. Ryan's silver SUV rested in our driveway, and I knew Linda and Ryan were within, likely sharing drinks and plotting their future with my insurance funds. Time to position the ultimate element of my snare. I lingered until 4:30, allowing them time to become relaxed and assured. Then I quietly neared our house via the backyard, employing my extra key to enter through the side door. I could hear voices and merriment from above. Calm, close sounds of 2 individuals who believed they were utterly secure. Proceeding soundlessly through my own residence felt dreamlike. Every creak of the flooring seemed magnified. Every shadow felt perilous. But I'd been orchestrating this instant for days, and my hands were firm. First halt, our sleeping chamber. Linda's lingerie drawer was partially ajar. She'd likely retrieved the lubricant in anticipation of Ryan's arrival. I located the tube exactly where I'd found it weeks prior, hidden beneath satin and lace like a culpable secret. This was the decisive moment. I unscrewed the lid and emptied the transparent gel into our wash basin, observing it spiral down the drain. Then I replenished the tube with commercial super adhesive, securing the lid back meticulously. The replacement was impeccable. Same transparent consistency, same container, same mass. In the fervor of ardor, they'd never detect the difference. I positioned the tube back precisely where Linda had stashed it and proceeded to place my electronic gadgets. The wireless speaker went behind our family room sofa, small enough to be unseen, but oriented for maximum sound effect. I examined the link. My phone displayed a robust signal. The altered fire sensor was already fitted, flashing innocently on our ceiling. To anyone else, it appeared as standard protection gear. Only I knew it was linked to the distant activator in my pocket. I could still hear them above. Linda's youthful chuckle, Ryan's assured tone, the sounds of two people who thought they were escaping with homicide, utterly unaware that retribution was imminent. Everything was in place. The snare was prepared. The substituted lubricant awaited in Linda's drawer like a delayed explosive. The crisis response setup was ready to engage at the press of a switch. I slipped back out through the side and returned to my vehicle 3 blocks away. From there, I had a clear view of our house and could monitor the street for crisis vehicles when the time arrived. Now all I had to do was linger. Linger for them to become comfortable. Linger for them to employ Linda's special preparation. Linger for the commercial adhesive to perform its task. Ryan Thompson thought he was intelligent, seducing mature women and scheming elaborate frauds. Linda thought she was astute, plotting to assassinate her husband for insurance money. Neither of them had any idea that Brian Hayes, dull old sales overseer, was about to impart a lesson they'd never forget. The pursuer was about to become the pursued, and I had the perfect snare waiting for them. From my vehicle, I watched our house and lingered. The late afternoon sunlight cast extended shadows across our district, and everything appeared serene and ordinary. Mrs. Jenkins was tending her flowers. Children were cycling along the pavement. Nobody had any notion that in a few moments our quiet Seattle suburb was about to witness the controversy of the decade. At 5:00, the sounds from our house shifted. I could hear tunes playing. Linda had selected something amorous. The close merriment grew softer, more private. They were advancing toward the instant that would ruin them both. I sat in my vehicle, hands clenching the wheel, listening to the distant echoes of my wife's disloyalty. Part of me yearned to burst into that house and confront them outright, but I'd progressed too far to allow sentiment to spoil my flawless plan. At 5:30, the tunes halted. The house grew silent, except for subdued voices from our sleeping chamber. I knew what was transpiring. Linda was probably igniting candles, uncorking wine, crafting the romantic ambiance she believed Ryan merited. The same romantic acts she'd ceased performing for me years ago. "You're so stunning," I heard Ryan's voice waft through our open sleeping chamber window. "I've been contemplating this all day," Linda replied, her voice breathless with anticipation. I shut my eyes, compelling myself to remain concentrated. This wasn't about the liaison anymore. This was about equity for all of Ryan's targets. This was about halting a hunter and a prospective killer. At 5:45, I heard Linda's drawer open, the instant I'd been awaiting. "I have something unique for us," she said, her voice playful and alluring. "You always consider everything," Ryan responded. There was shuffling movement, the sounds of two people preparing for closeness. I imagined Linda retrieving the tube from her hiding spot, completely unaware that its contents had been substituted with commercial adhesive. For several minutes, there were only gentle sounds, whispered affections, the kinds of intimate noises that should have been between spouses, not between plotters scheming murder. Then at 5:53, everything transformed. "Wait." Ryan's voice abruptly tense. "Something feels off." "What do you mean?" Linda asked. "I can't. This isn't correct. We're adhered." "Adhered? What are you discussing? I mean, we're literally adhered together." "What was in that tube?" Linda's voice escalated to alarm. "It was just lubricant. The same kind I always employ. Well, it's not functioning like lubricant. We can't detach. I could hear them struggling, their voices rising from bewilderment to dread, to outright terror. The commercial super adhesive was doing exactly what it was engineered to do, creating an indissoluble bond that would require professional medical intervention to dissolve. Do something, Linda shrieked. I'm attempting. But every time I shift, it worsens. This can't be occurring. This can't be occurring. Their terror was melody to my ears. For months, they'd been composed and assured, plotting my death like a commercial deal. Now they were learning what it felt like to be ensnared with no escape, but their genuine mortification hadn't even commenced yet. I reached for my phone and opened the program that controlled my fire sensor. Time for the district to encounter the real Ryan Thompson and Linda Hayes. I sat in my vehicle, listening to Ryan and Linda's panicked voices through our sleeping chamber window, and smiled for the first time in months. The commercial super adhesive was operating flawlessly. Now it was time for the actual spectacle to begin. I opened the program on my phone and pressed the switch that would change everything, immediately. The altered fire sensor in our family room began blaring. The shrill alarm sliced through the calm Wednesday afternoon like a blade, echoing off the residences in our peaceful district. But that was just the commencement. I engaged the wireless speaker and initiated the sound file I'd prepared. Suddenly, terrifying cries for assistance began emanating from inside our house. Aid us, Blaze. We're confined. The recorded voices sounded desperate, genuine, like individuals facing immediate peril. Please, someone summon 911. We can't escape. The blend of the fire alarm and the cries created precisely the crisis scenario I'd orchestrated. Within moments, neighbors began emerging from their homes, glancing around in confusion and alarm. Mrs. Jenkins dropped her watering can and rushed toward our house. Oh my goodness. Brian and Linda's house is ablaze. Mr. Lee from across the pavement seized his phone. I'm contacting 911, Fire Brigade. There's a residence fire on Pine Avenue with individuals trapped inside. We can hear them crying out. More neighbors materialized. Mrs. Harris from 3 doors away. The Browns with their adolescent children. Elderly Mr. Grant walking as swiftly as his walker permitted. Within minutes, half the district was assembled on our front grass, staring at our house with expressions of terror and worry. The exquisite irony was that Ryan and Linda could hear everything transpiring outside, but they were in no condition to summon aid or clarify their predicament. They were literally adhered together in our sleeping chamber, probably attempting frantically to dress and detach before anyone uncovered them. Where's the smoke, Mrs.? Jenkins inquired, examining our house. I don't see any flames. Maybe it's just beginning. Mr. Lee replied. But listen, you can hear people crying inside. The recorded distress calls continued emanating from my hidden speaker, crafting the perfect illusion of a blaze emergency with trapped sufferers. I'd even incorporated sounds of wheezing and gasping to make it more authentic. From my vehicle, I could see Ryan's SUV in our driveway. The neighbors were beginning to notice it too. Whose vehicle is that, Mrs.? Harris asked. Isn't that Ryan's, Mrs.? Jenkins said gradually. Megan's husband. What would he be doing here when Brian's at work? I could practically see the fragments connecting in their minds. The neighbors who'd always thought Linda and Ryan were just amicable relatives were starting to realize there might be more to the narrative. That's when the sirens commenced. First 1, then 3, then what sounded like half the Seattle Fire Department racing along our pavement. Crimson engines, medical vans, patrol cars. The complete crisis response I'd engineered. And leading the procession was Aid Unit 15, Megan's unit. I watched my daughter leap out of the front seat, her nurse practitioner coordinator attire neat and expert. her face concentrated and resolute. She had no idea she was about to enter the most shattering moment of her life. "What's the circumstance?" Megan called out to the gathering of neighbors. House blaze with people confined inside. "Mister," Lee shouted back, "we can hear them crying." Megan's preparation took command. She began guiding her crew toward our front entrance while the fire brigade readied their gear. She appeared utterly professional, utterly in control. She had no notion that in about 45 seconds she was going to discover her husband and her mother exposed and adhered together in her childhood sleeping chamber. I started my vehicle and began driving slowly toward our house, prepared to enact my role as the stunned and worried husband who'd just arrived home to find his residence surrounded by crisis vehicles. The snare was triggered, the spectators were gathered, and the performance was about to commence. Megan stood at our front entrance, her nurse practitioner preparation assuming total control. She'd responded to thousands of crisis calls, but never to her own childhood residence. "Fire brigade, we require access now." She called to Captain Ellis. "We have verified voices inside. Possible fume inhalation sufferers. The mallet crashed against our front entrance." Splintering the timber, Megan led her health crew inside, while firefighters followed with apparatus and lines. "Hello, fire brigade." Captain Ellis's voice resounded through our house. "Where are you? Shout if you can hear us." Megan moved through our family room with expert efficiency, checking for fumes, searching for sufferers. The residence seemed ordinary. No visible blaze, no fumes, but the distress calls had been distinct. From above came Ryan's muffled, desperate voice. "Up here, sleeping chamber. We need assistance." Megan's head jerked up. That voice was familiar. Too familiar. "Second level. Main sleeping chamber." She called to her crew, ascending the stairs 2 at a time. She reached our sleeping chamber door and rapped firmly. "This is Seattle Fire Rescue. Are you harmed? We require health aid," came Ryan's strained voice. "There's been a mishap." Megan turned the doorknob and pushed open the door to her childhood sleeping chamber. What she beheld made her freeze utterly. Ryan, her husband Ryan, was in bed with Linda, her mother Linda. They were both exposed, clearly alarmed, and somehow physically linked in a way that made no sense. For a moment, Megan's mind simply couldn't process what she was witnessing. Her professional preparation informed her these were two individuals in health distress. Her personal reality informed her this was inconceivable. "Megan," Ryan's voice was scarcely a murmur. "I can clarify. We're adhered," Linda said, not meeting her daughter's gaze. "Something went awry with... We can't detach." Megan stood in the entryway, her health kit in one hand, her communicator in the other, staring at the two people who had just demolished her entire world. Behind her, Captain Ellis appeared. "What's the circumstance?" Megan's voice faltered. For the first time in her career, she couldn't articulate. Captain Ellis looked over her shoulder, and his expression shifted immediately. "Oh, damn. This is a health situation." Megan's preparation finally overrode her personal shock. She stepped into the room, her voice becoming coldly expert. "We need solvent and health adhesive dissolver from the medical van," she called down to her crew. "Bring dermal separation gear and discomfort management supplies." Ryan tried to reach for her. "Megan, please heed me." She stepped back, evading his touch. "Don't. Just don't speak right now." Linda was weeping, but Megan couldn't discern if it was from bodily discomfort or emotional turmoil. Perhaps both. "How long have you been like this?" Megan inquired, her preparation compelling her to collect data. "About 90 minutes, Ryan replied. "We attempted everything. We can't shift without intense discomfort." Megan nodded briefly and spoke into her communicator. "This is Unit 15. We need extra health support for adhesive removal. 2 patients aware and responsive." As her crew brought up the health supplies, Megan worked with mechanical accuracy. She detached people from commercial adhesives before, workplace incidents, jests gone astray, but never her own mother and husband. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was literally separating the two people who had ripped her family asunder. While Megan labored above to detach Ryan and Linda, I enacted my role flawlessly outside. The throng of neighbors had expanded, and word was disseminating through our Seattle suburb like a conflagration. "I just can't fathom this," Mrs. Jenkins whispered to Mrs. Harris. "Linda and Ryan, right under Brian's nose. That poor fellow." Mr. Lee shook his head, regarding me with compassion. 35 years of union. I stood amid them, the image of a devastated husband whose world was collapsing. "I don't comprehend any of this," I said, my voice cracking just sufficiently to sound genuine. "Ryan's been assisting with lawn maintenance for months." Linda said they hardly conversed. "Sometimes the individuals closest to us conceal the largest secrets." "Elderly Mr. Grant said, patting my shoulder sympathetically. More neighbors arrived every few moments. People were extracting their devices, documenting everything. By tomorrow morning, this controversy would be all over Seattle social networks. "Here they come!" someone in the throng shouted. The front entrance opened, and Megan emerged first. Her face a facade of professional poise that couldn't quite conceal her personal ruin. Behind her, 2 health workers wheeled out a gurney. Ryan was on it, covered by a pale sheet, but his face visible in vivid scarlet with shame. He couldn't regard anyone in the throng, especially not me. The neighbors pressed nearer, everyone attempting to obtain a better view. Device flashes sparked from every direction. "Ryan Thompson, Mrs. Jenkins called out loudly. "How could you do this to Megan, to this family?" Ryan turned his face away, but there was nowhere to conceal. The entire district was witnessing his ultimate path of disgrace. A second gurney appeared with Linda, also covered, but clearly aware and humiliated. She was weeping, not from bodily discomfort, but from the shattering mortification of being caught in the most compromising circumstance imaginable. "Linda Hayes," Mrs. Harris announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I am utterly shocked after everything Brian has done for you." The throng murmured concurrence, their sympathy evidently with me. I had become the sufferer, the wronged spouse, the man who merited everyone's backing. "Megan," I called out as the gurneys were loaded into separate medical vans. "What hospital are you transporting them to?" She regarded me with eyes full of discomfort and bewilderment. "Seattle General. Dad. I'm so sorry. I had no idea this was transpiring. None of us did. Dear, none of us could have known." As the medical vans departed with sirens howling, I stood on our front grass, surrounded by neighbors and crisis personnel. The whole pavement had witnessed Ryan and Linda's public degradation. Captain Ellis approached me. "Sir, for our documentation. We didn't find any proof of an actual blaze. The fire sensor appears to have malfunctioned. Perhaps they were the ones calling for assistance," I suggested. "When they got adhered like that, that's probably it. I'm sorry you had to discover the situation this way." Mr. Hayes. As the last crisis vehicle drove away, I felt a profound, gratifying sense of equity. Ryan Thompson's fraud game was concluded. His reputation was demolished. Every woman in Seattle would soon know exactly what kind of hunter he truly was. And Linda, her disloyalty was now public knowledge throughout our entire community. Flawless. 3 hours later, I sat in Seattle General's waiting area enacting the concerned spouse impeccably. The emergency personnel whispered about the unusual incident. 2 people adhered together wasn't something they encountered daily. Megan appeared, emotionally exhausted but still in her nurse practitioner attire. She sat beside me silently. "How are they?" I inquired, placing my arm around her. "Physically okay," she said quietly. "Physicians used solvent and dissolvers to detach them. Some dermal irritation, but no lasting harm. And emotionally, Megan laughed bitterly. Mom won't regard me. Ryan keeps attempting to clarify. I squeezed her shoulder. I'm sorry you had to behold that. Dear. Dad. Did you have any doubt at all? I looked perplexed. None. Ryan was around aiding with yard tasks, but I thought he was just being helpful. Your mother seemed altered lately, but I figured it was job tension. Megan nodded, accepting my explanation. They're retaining them overnight for monitoring. Room 312 for Mom, 314 for Ryan. Can I see Linda? Are you certain you're prepared? 35 years doesn't conclude without some dialogue. I found Linda's room and knocked gently. She was gazing at the ceiling, began weeping when she saw me. Brian, I'm so sorry. I never intended for this to occur. I sat down, hurt and perplexed. How long? Linda, 7 months. She whispered. But Ryan said he cherished me. Said we could have a future. What about our future, our union? She couldn't meet my gaze. I thought perhaps you'd be happier without me. We haven't been intimate in years. I leaned forward, taking her hand. Whatever issues we had, we could have resolved them. But this, with Megan's husband, I know how dreadful this is. A caregiver entered with a small tube. Mrs. Hayes, apply this soothing ointment to any dermal irritation. It should assist with swelling. Thank you, Linda said, placing the tube on her bedside stand. I should allow you to rest, I said, rising. We'll converse tomorrow. Please don't despise me. I could never despise you. Linda, I'm just profoundly wounded. I kissed her brow and departed. Once in the corridor, I ducked into a storage closet I'd noticed earlier. From my coat, I extracted concentrated capsaicin cream, heavy duty, from Lowe's pest management section, nearly matching the soothing ointment the caregiver had provided. I waited 15 minutes, then walked back. The corridor was vacant, visiting time concluding, personnel occupied elsewhere. I slipped into Linda's room. She was napping, fatigued. The soothing ointment sat exactly where she'd left it. Acting swiftly, I exchanged the tubes. The capsaicin cream looked identical to the medical ointment. Linda would never notice until she applied it to her irritated skin. I pocketed the genuine ointment and left silently. Phase 2 was underway. After exchanging Linda's soothing ointment, I wasn't done yet. Ryan merited the same handling. I walked down the hall to room 314 and knocked gently. Ryan was awake, staring at his device with a troubled expression. Brian, he said, looking up with remorse and fear. I don't know what to utter. I entered the room, my face displaying the perfect blend of hurt and bewilderment. Ryan, I trusted you. I welcomed you into our kin. How could you do this to Megan? To me? It just transpired, he said weakly. Linda and I, we bonded. I never meant to wound anyone. I sat down in the guest chair. Bonded. Ryan, you're wedded to my daughter. Linda is my wife of 35 years, before he could retort. A caregiver entered with an identical tube of soothing ointment. Mr. Thompson, for any dermal irritation from the adhesive detachment. Apply as required. Ryan took the tube and set it on his bedside stand. Thank you, the caregiver left, and I continued our dialogue for a few more minutes, enacting the injured father-in-law. When I was certain Ryan was sufficiently diverted by guilt, I excused myself. I need some fresh air, I said. This is all too overwhelming to process. I left his room and waited in the corridor until I was sure no personnel were around. Then I slipped back into Ryan's room. He had dozed off, exhausted from the day's events. I swiftly exchanged his soothing ointment with another tube of concentrated capsaicin cream. Now both of them would experience the scorching consequences of their disloyalty. I returned to the waiting area and sat with Megan. sustaining my role as the devastated family head. 90 minutes after I'd exchanged both soothing ointment tubes, I sat in the waiting area with Megan, sustaining my role as the devastated family head. Then the shrieking began. "Help, something's amiss. It's scorching." Linda's voice from room 312, high-pitched with terror. Seconds later, Ryan's voice from 314. "Caregiver. The ointment. Something's wrong with this ointment." Megan jumped up immediately, her health preparation activating. "That's Mom." We rushed toward the rooms as caregivers and physicians converged from all directions. I followed behind, enacting the concerned spouse while secretly relishing every instant. Linda was writhing in her hospital bed, tears streaming down her face, desperately attempting to wipe something off her skin. "The ointment!" she screamed at the caregiver. I applied the soothing ointment, and it's like inferno. "Make it cease." In the adjacent room, Ryan was having an identical reaction. His face contorted in torment as he tried to remove the capsaicin cream that was now scorching his irritated skin. "Get me dairy," Megan shouted to a caregiver immediately, recognizing the signs. "And vegetable oil. This looks like capsaicin exposure." "Doctor." Thompson rushed in, examining the tubes on both bedside stands. "How did capsaicin get into medical soothing ointment?" "Perhaps a production flaw," Megan suggested, though her voice carried suspicion. The health staff worked frantically, using dairy and oil to counteract the scorching sensation. Linda and Ryan were both crying from the discomfort, their skin vivid crimson where they had applied my special soothing ointment. The discomfort should diminish in about 45 minutes. "Doctor," Thompson told them, "but this is highly anomalous. We'll need to report this to the producer." I stood in the corridor, observing the turmoil with profound satisfaction. The heavy-duty capsaicin from Lowe's pest management section was doing exactly what I'd anticipated, delivering a scorching reminder of their disloyalty. "How are you enduring, Dad?" Megan asked, placing her hand on my shoulder. "I just don't comprehend how any of this transpired," I replied, shaking my head sorrowfully. "First the liaison. Now this health mishap. It's like everything is disintegrating." As the health team continued treating Linda and Ryan's capsaicin burns, I noticed activity at the lift. Mrs. Jenkins had arrived, looking agitated and determined. She marched straight toward us, her face flushed with ire and intent. "Brian," she called out, "I heard about what transpired today, about Ryan and Linda being caught together." "Laura, this really isn't the moment," I said gently. "As you can see, we're dealing with a health crisis." "No, Brian," she said firmly, her voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "This is the moment, because I have something very crucial to tell you about Ryan Thompson." Megan looked up from consulting with the physicians. "Mrs. Jenkins." "What do you imply?" Laura looked between Megan and me, then toward Ryan's room, where his groans of discomfort were still audible. "I mean, your husband isn't who you think he is. Megan. And Brian, what happened to you today? You're not Ryan's only sufferer." The corridor grew quiet, except for the continued sounds of health activity. Even the caregivers seemed to sense that something significant was about to be disclosed. Mrs. Jenkins clutched her bag tightly, her hands trembling with emotion. "Ryan Thompson has been deceiving all of us." Mrs. Jenkins looked directly at Megan. "Your husband has been having a liaison with me for 9 months. He told me he cherished me, that he'd leave you. He took $12,000 from me for his faltering business." Megan staggered backward. "That's inconceivable. After hearing about today, I started making contacts," Laura continued, extracting her device. "Sophia Lee, Rebecca Harris, Olivia Grant. Ryan has been courting all of them." Megan leaned against the wall. "How many women?" "At least 7 that I have discovered." "Sophia gave him over $25,000. Rebecca's been paying his lease for 7 months. Olivia bought him a vehicle, thinking it was a betrothal gift. From Ryan's room came another groan, but now he sounded like he could hear every word, as if summoned. Two more women appeared at the lift, Sophia Lee and Rebecca Harris, both looking perplexed and concerned. "Laura contacted us," Sophia said. "We came when we heard Ryan was hospitalized." Rebecca frowned. "But Laura, Ryan told me you were just a neighbor. He said we were practically cohabiting. He told me the same about you," Laura replied. The three women stared at each other, Ryan's deceit becoming crystal clear. "I think we need to compare accounts about Ryan Thompson," I said gently. For the next 90 minutes, Ryan's sufferers shared their narratives. The pattern was identical. Charm prosperous, mature women, then gradually request money. Minor amounts first, then larger sums for business crises. "He assisted me update my testament," Olivia Grant admitted quietly. "Named him a $20,000 beneficiary. $40,000 for me," Sophia said. Megan listened in stunned silence. When Rebecca mentioned Ryan having keys to her residence and bank access, Megan finally spoke. "We need to contact the authorities." "Already did." Laura said, "Investigator Ellis is en route. This is systematic deceit. Through Ryan's door. We could hear him attempting to make calls, probably alerting other sufferers, but his hands trembled from capsaicin treatment, making it challenging." "How much money total?" Megan inquired. The women calculated. "Between us three, over $60,000 plus the vehicle." I placed my arm around Megan. "I'm sorry, dear. None of us foresaw this." But inside, I was gratified. Ryan's realm of falsehoods was crumbling, and he was powerless to halt it. The lift opened. Investigator Ellis stepped out. Identification visible. Ryan's fraud game was officially concluded. Investigator Ellis was a straightforward, seasoned officer in his 50s who'd evidently seen every type of fraud Seattle had to offer. He listened to each woman's narrative with expert attention, taking detailed records. "Mr. Thompson," he said, entering Ryan's hospital room. "I need to discuss with you about claims of deceit and plotting." Ryan, still recovering from the capsaicin burns, tried to sit straighter. "I don't know what you're referring to." "These women, they provided me money voluntarily for a gardening business that doesn't exist," Investigator Ellis replied. "We've already verified. Your business permit lapsed 3 years ago. No tax submissions, no legitimate earnings." I observed from the corridor as Ryan's face paled. His smooth discourse meant nothing when confronted with actual legal repercussions. "And then there's the matter of the life insurance coverage," the investigator continued. "We have recordings of you and Mrs. Hayes discussing schemes to assassinate her husband." Ryan's eyes widened. "Recordings? That's inconceivable. Technology is remarkable these days. Mr. Thompson, sound-activated digital recorders. Very compact. Very clear sound quality. I had provided Investigator Ellis the recording gadget from our family room along with duplicates of all the proof I'd gathered. Ryan's fraud game wasn't just disintegrating. It was being methodically dismantled by law enforcement. "Ryan Thompson, you're detained for deceit, plotting to commit homicide, and senior mistreatment," Investigator Ellis announced, extracting restraints, even with his hands still crimson and painful from the capsaicin. Ryan was restrained to his hospital bed. The man who'd charmed his way into so many women's lives was now facing substantial incarceration time. In the adjacent room, Investigator Ellis's associate was reading Linda her rights. "Linda Hayes, you're detained for plotting to commit homicide and insurance deceit." Megan stood beside me, observing her mother and husband both being detained. "Dad, how did you know to record them?" I placed my arm around her shoulders. "I didn't. I found that recording gadget after the fire brigade departed. It must have been triggered by all the commotion. Pure fortune that it captured their dialogue. It was a flawless falsehood, and Megan accepted it utterly. Over the next few days, the narrative exploded across Seattle. Local gardener detained in multi-sufferer fraud scheme made the front page of the Seattle Times. Ryan's image was everywhere, alerting other potential sufferers. The district rallied around me with astonishing support. Meals appeared on my doorstep daily. Mrs. Jenkins organized a support circle for Ryan's sufferers. The community viewed me as the ultimate sufferer, a man who'd been betrayed by both his wife and son-in-law. Brian Hayes is a decent man who merits better, Mrs. Harris told a local news correspondent. What Ryan and Linda did to him is unpardonable. Ryan was denied release due to escape risk. The accuser found proof of similar frauds in 4 other states, making him a repeat offender. He was facing 20 years in incarceration. Linda was freed on release, but had to reside with her sibling. I filed for dissolution immediately, and thanks to the adultery and plotting charges, I retained everything: the residence, my retirement funds, my life insurance coverage. Most gratifying was observing Ryan's other sufferers obtain equity. Sophia Lee sued for reclamation of her $25,000. Rebecca Harris pressed charges for theft. Olivia Grant retrieved her vehicle. Ryan Thompson, the charming sugar mama pursuer, was finished. 3 weeks after the detentions, Megan relocated back home with me. We sat on our front veranda one night observing the sunset over Puget Sound. "Dad, I'm sorry I brought Ryan into our kin," she said quietly. "You couldn't have known what he truly was. Dear. Hunters like Ryan are masters at deception. I just feel so foolish." "You're not foolish. You're a good individual who trusted someone you cherished. That's not a flaw." Megan smiled for the first time since the controversy erupted. "Thanks, Dad. I'm glad we have each other." I squeezed her hand, feeling genuinely joyful for the first time in months. Ryan and Linda had attempted to demolish our kin, but instead they'd only made Megan and me closer. Equity, as they say, was delivered. 7 months later, I stood in my kitchen preparing breakfast for Megan and myself, listening to the morning broadcast on the radio. The host was reporting Ryan's judgment: 22 years in federal incarceration for deceit, plotting, and senior mistreatment across multiple states. "Good," Megan said, entering the kitchen in her nurse practitioner attire. He got what he merited. Our morning routine had become comfortable and restorative. Megan labored her shifts at Seattle General, and I'd returned to Lowe's, though now as a part-time advisor rather than full-time overseer. We both needed time to reconstruct our lives. The district had embraced us utterly. Mrs. Jenkins had become like kin, often joining us for weekend meals. Sophia Lee, Rebecca Harris, and Olivia Grant had formed their own support circle, and they'd all recovered most of their funds through Ryan's asset confiscation. "Dad," Megan said over tea, "I've been considering relocating back to my own place soon." I looked up, concerned. "Are you sure you're ready?" "There's no hurry. I think I am, but I want to remain nearby. Maybe that condo complex in Capitol Hill. It's only 15 minutes away." "That sounds ideal, dear." The truth was, I was proud of how resilient Megan had become. The controversy had devastated her initially, but she'd channeled that discomfort into becoming an even better nurse practitioner. She'd been elevated to area coordinator, and her colleagues respected her professionalism in handling the most challenging circumstance imaginable. "What about you, Dad?" "Any thoughts about courting again?" I chuckled. "After what I've endured, I think I'll adhere to being single for a while. Besides, I've got my hands full being the district's unofficial advisor for women who've been swindled by younger men." It was true. Word had disseminated throughout Seattle about Ryan's operation, and I'd become something of an authority on recognizing the indicators of romance scams. I'd assisted 4 other families identify and halt similar frauds. "You're like a champion," Megan teased. "Brian Hayes, protector of susceptible women everywhere. Just a fellow who learned the difficult way how to spot a hunter. That afternoon, I drove to Lowe's for my shift. My coworkers treated me with a mixture of admiration and astonishment. The narrative of how I'd exposed Ryan and Linda had become legendary in our store. "Brian, you're like something from a film," my deputy overseer, Miguel, said. "Using commercial super adhesive to catch betrayers. That's brilliant." "Just issue resolving," I replied. "Same abilities I employ here every day. But privately, I was proud of what I'd achieved." Ryan Thompson had been a professional hunter who'd harmed dozens of women. Linda had been willing to assassinate her husband of 35 years for money. They'd both received exactly what they merited. That night, Megan and I sat on our front veranda observing the sunset over Puget Sound. It had become our favored time of day. Peaceful, contemplative, optimistic. "Dad, can I ask you something, of course? Do you ever regret how everything transpired?" The way Ryan and Mom were caught, I pondered the inquiry carefully. "I regret that you had to behold what you beheld. I regret that our kin was torn asunder by their avarice and disloyalty. But do I regret that they faced repercussions for their actions? No. Not for a moment." Megan nodded. "I'm glad you feel that way because what they did was inexcusable. The crucial thing is that we endured it. We're stronger now, and we know we can rely on each other always." She concurred. As the sun set over Seattle, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine satisfaction. Ryan was in incarceration where he belonged. Linda was facing her own legal repercussions. The women Ryan had victimized were obtaining equity and support. And Megan and I had constructed something stronger than what Ryan and Linda had attempted to demolish. Sometimes equity comes from the tribunals. Sometimes it comes from the community. And sometimes it comes from a 62-year-old Lowe's overseer who refuses to be anyone's sufferer. I'd learned that vengeance, when delivered properly, doesn't just penalize the culpable. It safeguards the innocent and constructs something better from the debris. Ryan Thompson thought he could demolish Brian Hayes' life. Instead, he'd only made it more robust. And that was the sweetest vengeance of all. Sometimes life imparts lessons in the most unforeseen ways. My narrative isn't just another one of those disloyalty tales you hear daily. It's about discovering that even in our gloomiest moments, a higher power has a scheme for equity. When I found that tube of lubricant in Linda's drawer, I never envisioned it would lead to exposing a professional hunter who had victimized so many blameless women. The lesson here isn't about vengeance. It's about protecting others and defending what's right, like many elders' tales passed down through generations. This account reminds us that insight comes with maturity. And sometimes the reserved ones are observing more attentively than anyone realizes. Ryan Thompson thought he could manipulate mature people because he undervalued our experience and resolve. What I learned is that a higher power works in enigmatic ways, providing us the instruments and knowledge we need precisely when we require them. My 45 years at Lowe's, my comprehension of compounds and electronics, none of it was coincidence. Every ability I developed was preparation for the instant when I needed to protect not just myself, but Megan and all of Ryan's other sufferers. These disloyalty narratives always conclude the same way. Truth eventually emerges, and equity triumphs. A higher power observes everything, even when we think we're isolated in our suffering. The most vital lesson from all elder tales like mine is that family connections, when tested by adversity, either shatter utterly or become indestructible. Megan and I chose indestructible. If this narrative touched your spirit or reminded you of your own encounters with disloyalty and equity, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to confront someone who undervalued you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more astonishing true narratives of bravery, equity, and family connections. Your support helps us bring these potent accounts to